This is the Revision Podcast.
Welcome to the Revision Podcast. My name is Will and I'm your host. And I hope that we can talk about a topic today that will just encourage and lift you up. Hope you like the new studio. Still getting things in order, still working. I thought by now, just to be honest with you, I thought by now that everything would be ready to rock and roll. And that's one of the things that I have always taught in business is always start slowly because you never know what is going to come up. And so here we are. I got a new desk taken care of. That was something that was not planned, but very, very much appreciated because now I have a lot more room to spread out. I can now adjust my studio a little bit, as you can tell. I've started decorating a little bit. This will probably change over time, because why not? And yeah, all of that. And so today, I just wanted to bring a topic to you that really I hadn't thought about until recently. And actually, I started researching this, reading on it back in December. So by the time you listen to this will be in May, and unless you listen to a re-record of it. But um, I got on reading on the topic of when God silences people. Now, you and I, we are always looking for ways that God talks to us and God speaks to us. But there are times that God tells us to be quiet. And, it says in the book of Psalms, be still and know that I'm God. Things like that, where we know in Scripture where we are called to be quiet or to be still. But sometimes God goes a step further and says, I'm going to take care of this problem. So I base this all out of the book of Luke, chapter 1, which is the story of the birth of Christ. But prior to that, there was an event that happened. And so we're going to talk about that today. And so I encourage you, before we get started, share, like, and subscribe. This podcast is one where we talk about the Bible, talk about business, we talk about them together, we talk about them separately. And there will be times where I'll have an interview on here. So you don't want to miss out. And I tell people all the time, share it with your family, share it with your friends, but share it with your enemies because you never know. Maybe they'll become your best friend after that. Or maybe they don't want to ever talk to you again. Who knows. But anyway, so as I was preparing for it and studying, I got to read about uh, Zachariah, who is who was a man in the Bible that God ordained him, if you will, through the other people that are there at the temple to be one that would go in and offer sacrifice. And back in this time, they had people that would do that. They would have priests go in and offer sacrifices for the sins of the nation, for the sins of the people, for the sins of their family. And that was one thing that Zacharias was ordained to do at this point in time. Now, Zacharias is not just some obscure character in the Bible. He is actually married to John the Baptist's mother. John the Baptist's mother, if I can learn how to talk today, and that is the cousin of Jesus. And there's a lot packed just with John the Baptist. And so this is one reason why I could probably see why God would say, maybe we should take it a step further. And so God spoke to Zechariah in the temple at the time he went in. And here's the thing. Whenever God speaks to you, it's not always the same way. Some people don't believe that God can talk to you at all. Some people believe that God can only speak to you through the Bible. Some people believe that God speaks through angels. And some people believe that God speaks through other people. I happen to believe all the above because I believe God is a God who cannot be boxed in. God can talk to anyone at any time, any place, and his own way, his own manner. So I wouldn't have been surprised at this point either. And just to be quite honest with you, not surprised that Zacharias wasn't surprised. Um, if you notice, if you're reading in Luke 1, it says that he went in and behold, an angel appeared to him. to talk to him. And he talks to him through Gabriel. And while he was just doing his normal bit, his normal duties, now a lot of times people think that the heavens open up and the waters part and everything just stops. And it's a miraculous event, which in part it is. I have to agree, sometimes it is. But Zacharias wasn't going out doing a weird, different thing. He was going through his normal day. And sometimes God will just stop us in the middle of our normal everyday life, in our normal every moment. And He'll talk to us in the most unexpected way when we're not expecting it. And that's what happened here in the book of Luke, chapter 1. He approached him, Zacharias, through Gabriel to deliver a message. And there's often no warning this is going to happen. And I'm sure Zacharias didn't go into this temple expecting that God would talk to him in that moment. And so imagine going in, doing your normal everyday life thing, your normal bidding, everything that you need to do. And all of a sudden, this angel appears to you. And what happened here is that Zacharias was approached with the unthinkable. Gabriel said, your wife's going to have a baby. Now, let's backtrack here. Zacharias was not a young chicken, and his wife was not a young chicken either. None of them were young chickens. His wife Elizabeth, as a matter of fact, was very barren. She had not had any kids at this point. Kind of reminds me of back in Genesis when Sarah wasn't able to have any children. Barren. And God uses the unexpected and the unimaginable to do things that we could never think would ever happen. Because, it just isn't plausible in our own mind. And so, this angel comes before Zacharias to tell him, hey, your wife is going to have a baby. And not only that, he's going to be the one that will pave the way for the message of the Son of God to occur. And here's the thing. Could you imagine being told that your kid is going to be the prophetic one? And the one that is going to be able to help change the world? And not only that, there's going to be stories about him. Now, I'm reading between the lines here, okay, because honestly, Luke wasn't there in the room with him. Now, the Bible is God ordained, it's God breathed, it's God written for man, but God, who knows, God might have said, you know what, this is what I want. And now, the Bible is pretty big in itself. Could you imagine if God told him to write down every single thought and word that these people had during that time? And in that moment, the unthinkable, the unimaginable, and I want to think of, I want to write, I want you to write about 5 pages of just the room. God wanted to get to the point in this story where he goes, no, I want him to know this is what I want. But imagine all these things going through Zacharias' mind. He had a lot more faith than me. I'd be kind of questioning this. So, how do I know that this was going to happen? Da da da. Who are you again? And let me see your credentials. Kind of like, all the other characters in the Bible that questioned it. But Zechariah was completely in the right, in my opinion, which is very little, but in my opinion, to question. But I think the mistake happened in what we're going to talk about here in just a minute. The mistake happened when he questioned God in the matter. Sometimes God is like, no, this is what's going to happen. And I need you to fully trust in me that it's going to happen. And we look at verse 18 where Zechariah goes, how shall I know this? For I'm an old man and my wife is well advanced in age. Well, let's just go ahead and say, God said, well, here, I'll help you with that. I'm going to silence you. And this is where sometimes God goes, I need you to be quiet because you're going to ruin it for all of us. You know, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there's a deafening silence after this happened. For the angel Gabriel said, I am Gabriel who stands before you and stands in the presence of God, and I speak to you. But behold, you will be mute. You won't be able to speak because you did not believe my own words, but it will be fulfilled in time. Okay, I want you to hear the seriousness of that. You are in the throne room in the Holy of Holies in the temple. You're giving offerings, you're giving alms, you're giving a sacrifice. An angel appears to you and tells you this miraculous thing, and then all of a sudden you question God. I know it's a little quiet there because I want that to sink in. I want you to see the error that occurred. And I'm not saying I would be any different. Like I said earlier, I'd be asking questions. And sometimes we have to practice what is called prudence in the Bible. In the book of Proverbs, it says that we should be prudent. A prudent person is one who steps back, watches what's going on, and doesn't speak on it. They practice hesitation and quiet, and they realize that there's power in their words. There's a knowing in their heart that they could either build up or tear down something that is instrumental. And Zachariah did not have this at this point. He did not know of the power of the tongue, as it says in the book of Proverbs that there's life and death in the tongue, and there's power in his words. And he could either birth it, this dream, he could talk it, and now there's a fine line between name it and claim it. That's not what I'm getting at. What I am getting at, sometimes we can talk ourselves out of our own miracles. And that's what was going on here. God said, you know what? You're talking yourself out of this miracle, and you're going to abort this miracle. You're going to abort this dream that I have for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute you, not just because you're doing that, but I also want to prove a point that in order for you ever to speak again, this will have to happen. So you have to now believe, that this is going to occur, or you're just going to be mute for the rest of your life. And he was definitely muted because all throughout Elizabeth's pregnancy, all throughout the days before his birth, even the days after his birth, before he was to be taken to the temple, Zacharias' mouth, he might have been able to open it, but he had no words coming out of it. He had to write down anything that he had to say. And here's the key. God could have just let this go and just said, okay, that's fine. Because God doesn't need you or I. He doesn't need us to fulfill his plan. I mean, he created heaven and earth, for crying out loud. Every living, breathing thing, and even the things that are not breathing, the dirt on the ground. And I mean, in 6 days, he created everything. And whether it's 6 literal days or whatever, regardless, he created it. And so he doesn't need us. But to be part of this plan, he looked at Zacharias and said, you know what? I'm going to mute you so that you don't abort this dream. And I'm going to prove to you that you are an integral part of this plan coming to pass. And then God muted the unbelief right out of him. And here's the thing. We have to realize that there's a time and place, a season. Now, I know this is also a business podcast as well, and so I'll interject some business into this. Sometimes you and I, have this amazing plan in place. We have this amazing dream in place. We want to talk about it. And I'm guilty of that. And I had to be muted for a long time because of this, because I wanted everyone to hear, and not in a prideful way, but I want people to quote unquote pray about it. But here's the thing, when the wrong person hears, or the wrong individual, the wrong group of people hear, they will abort your dream. they will abort the vision. They will abort your business. So it's important that you and I practice prudence, we practice silence, we practice observation, we practice wisdom, and we learn from Zacharias here. Yes, Zachariah was questioning God. How can this happen? I mean, you and I, being business owners, when you look at the balance sheet, I don't know how this business is going to thrive today, let alone a year from now. It's so easy for us to speak that unbelief, to talk about that unbelief. But this God wants us to go, He's got it in our business, in our personal life, everywhere. And so we come to the point where he begins to see his dream, the goal, the vision come to pass. And he sees his wife showing. And now she's not just pregnant, she's very well noticeably pregnant. Now, why didn't God unmute him then? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I think God really wanted him to see from the end to the beginning completely the plan come to pass without him saying a word. Because how often do we go, oh, yeah, but, oh, yeah, but, oh, yeah, this could happen, but there's a reason that he was muted for that purpose. And so at this point in verse 57, chapter 1's a long, long, long chapter. Zacharias was undoubtedly silenced, so that not only that he would know, but it would be the proof of the people that came into his life that they would know. They wanted a part. They being the people in Elizabeth's life. They want to be a part. And it's cultural that they want to be a part of the birth of this child, the anointing of this child, the baptism of this child, if you will, the dedication. And at this point, they wanted to name the baby after Zacharias. Well, earlier, the angel Gabriel said, no, I want you to name him John. All right, well, how else are these people going to know unless he's unmuted, right? And of course, obviously, there's no reason why they should be naming him John. There's no reason why this child should be even in that same category, because there's no one in the family with that name, not that we see in record. And they make note of that. They say there's no one in his family. His father's name is Zachariah. Name him Zachariah. Don't name him anything else. So what happens? Well, Zacharias writes on a tablet, his name is John, and instantly his mouth is opened. Now, people will not understand why you believe the things that you believe, why you would name your child what or your dream what you would want to name it. They don't need to know. God has already told you. You already have that dream and that vision in your spirit, in your heart. Therefore, Zechariah knew that. And that's why he was like, no, his name is John because I've been told so by God. And it's very important that we see that. Now, Zacharias began to speak the moment that happened. And could you imagine the stories that he would be able to tell in the months leading up to John's birth? Sometimes God just keeps us quiet so we can store up those stories and prepare and percolate those things in us so that we can be ready when the time comes. Love Ecclesiastes. I know it can be looked at as a negative book, but there's a time to dream, a time to not. There's a time for birth, a time for death. There is a season for everything. And that's where Zechariah was in this moment. He was seeing God move. And in this season, he wasn't able to speak. And now he can, because now he can talk about all that God revealed to him, all that God showed him, everything that God had planned for him, everything that he had planned for John. Could you imagine the stories that he told John all the way up until he went into the wilderness? Could you imagine all the things that he had to say to John during that time? And this story is just proven to you and I that God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts, as it says in the book of Isaiah. And I mean, just think about it. God sent Jesus to live in to be born in the manger. God sent um, John the Baptist to pave the way and to carry the sandals of Christ, to baptize Jesus. Why? His ways do not make sense. Because, I mean, if you and I were God, we'd just be blowing up the heavens, having big old staircase coming down, angels singing, all the drums playing, everything going on. Jesus is here. But no, in the still quiet of the night, in an obscure town in the middle of nowhere, in a barn, the Son of God, the King of Kings, was born. And not only that, in a manger, a feeding trough. God's ways are not always our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. He knowingly planned and paved this way and even put things in motion, like the angel Gabriel coming to Zacharias and talking to him in the temple, saying, "You're going to be a father," even though there's no way that you should be able to. God's ways are not our ways. Why wouldn't he use a younger person who's well within their prime? Because God wanted to show off and go, hey, I'm going to use somebody who should not even be able to have children to make a name for Christ. God sent Jesus through this avenue, through the Virgin Mary in the same faucet. Why didn't he give Jesus to a married couple who was already getting ready to have children? Doesn't make sense, because God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. And that's why we have to be silent sometimes. God sometimes has to get us to be quiet, because sometimes we talk ourselves right off the cliff. We talk ourselves right out of the miracle. Well, I hope this encouraged you. I hope that you have a great day. As always, I hope that today has a great you. Take care.